Just a little bit.
Okay.
Like this?
He's fine. All right. We're talking today with Frank Maleckas Jr. of Scottsville, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Maleckas, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? For instance, where were you born and when?
Well, you see, my parents were European-born parents. They just came to this country somewhere in the neighborhood of 1910.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother from Poland and my dad from Lithuania. But at that time, those two countries were part of the Russian Empire.
Still part of Russia, that's right.
See? So I could be Lithuanian, Polish, and Russian.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that.
And then where did they move to?
Well, my dad, of course, was Lithuanian and subject to Russian domination. And when Dad started to get here, by the way, Russia at that time had universal military training.
Mm-hmm.
And so the time came for my dad to get drafted into the Russian army. He objected that very much. So there were agents, I don't know from where they were, when they learned that the Russians are going to draft that person, they encouraged him to immigrate out of the country.
Right.
So Dad got his call, and immediately these, I don't know what you'd call them, people that were good at getting people out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So they came in and talked Dad to leave the country. So Dad, well, he didn't like the army, to be in the army.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, how shall I put it? He walked out of Lithuania into East Prussia,
Right, so he goes into what's then Germany. Right?
Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And from there the Germans took over, and by rail he went to Hamburg.
Mm-hmm.
There he boarded the ship, and of course he was talked into immigrating out of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have been a German, or he could have been a
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Right.
He chose to be an American.
Mm-hmm.
So the Germans aided in giving him transport all the way from the Lithuanian border to the German port. I think it was called Hamburg.
Right, most likely.
And in Hamburg, of course, he got assistance to immigrate to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, of course, by some kind of word or mouth, the United States was described as some kind of a heavenly country.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of opportunity, new country, and all that sort of thing, and free of military, military, what you want to call it,
Obligation.
duty.
Yep.
So, to Dad, no military, great. So, sure thing, he was assisted by whoever it was, some Germans, to immigrate into the United States. So, I think it was about I'm going to guess, somewhere around 1910, 1912.
Right.
And he immigrated. But he described this immigration too.
Mm-hmm.
So when he got onto a ship, swarms of Lithuanians and Poles and a few Germans immigrated, boarded that ship, and that ship was just, the way he described it, just standing room only. You know, it's a crowded ship,
Mm-hmm.
just full of immigrants, Lithuanians, Poles, Russians, and a few Germans. So this was on or about somewhere between 1912 and 1914.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say 1914 he was in this country.
Okay. And then what kind of work did he find here?
What kind of work?
What kind of work, yeah.
Well, in Lithuania he was going to be a farmer. In this country, he well, like I say, he and almost all of Europe well, gathered in Germany. And of course, once in Germany, agents from other foreign countries, gave them opportunity to
Right.
go to this,
Mhm.
this. And my dad, of course, was met by a Lithuanian agent,
Mm-hmm.
and he said there's an awful lot of work available in Niagara Falls, New York.
Mm-hmm.
They need workers there. So Dad, well, he didn't know anything about Niagara
Sure.
Falls, New York, but it sounded good. So he became a citizen of Niagara Falls, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And while in New York, he got married, and got me.
Right.
I don't know how.
Probably the usual way. Now, so you're born in 1916?
I was born in 1916 in Niagara Falls, New York.
Okay. Now, did you grow up there?
Well, no. Dad worked in the factory, and he was a farmer in Lithuania.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't like factory work. He wanted to look for another opportunity.
Right.
And lo and behold, some sort of a Lithuanian agent from Michigan. These agents were like pests.
Right.
Along came the immigrants, and all kinds of agents descended upon him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this guy was from Michigan, and he described to Dad. Wait a minute. Michigan. He was from Niagara Falls, and he sold Dad on the opportunity to work in a factory in Niagara Falls. So Dad says, "Okay, to Niagara Falls." He worked there for a year. Got married, and of course had me.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like factory work, but he subscribed to a Lithuanian paper. And in the Lithuanian paper was a big ad from Michigan real estate
Mm-hmm.
agent about opportunities in Michigan, and lots of good fertile land,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of land available. So Dad says, "Okay, I'll take that." So he got. There's a lot of detail I can't tell you because I don't know.
That's fine.
But from New York, he ended up in Niagara Falls.
And then from Niagara Falls, and then where at?
Niagara Falls, New York, and
Yeah. And then where did he go in Michigan?
he worked in Niagara Falls, the flour mill factory, and he read the Lithuanian paper that there was a tremendous amount of available land in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And he read that paper, and he says, "I'm going to be a farmer. I could work land like I did in Lithuania, farmer." So he just itched, how am I going to get to Michigan? And boom, along came an agent
Right.
from Michigan, a Lithuanian agent,
Mm-hmm.
real estate agent. Just wonderful. There's lots of land in Michigan. If you want to go there, we will help you come to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So what else could Dad do? He didn't want to work in the factory,
Right.
and he was a farmer in Lithuania, so he came to Michigan, and boom, well, in Michigan, a Lithuanian real estate man came out, and of course talked to him, gave him, well, I can't give you all the details because I don't know, but helped Dad secure some land
Mm-hmm.
and become a farmer.
Right.
This was about 1920.
Okay. And then where was the farm? What area of Michigan?
It's south of Custer, about 6 miles.
Okay.
South of Custer, 6 miles.
All right.
And about 6 miles south and 2 miles east at a place called Barton's Lake.
Okay. And then did you then stay there for a while?
Okay, so this real estate man says, well, I got some good land there, you're a farmer, and I'll help you finance it.
Mm-hmm.
So the details I don't know. But he did all sorts of things to help Dad get finance here in Mason County.
Right.
So he bought a piece of land, 480 acres.
Mm-hmm.
But it was land that the timber people in the early 1910, 1920 stripped that land
Right.
of timber.
Right.
So all Dad had was a piece of raw land with stumps.
Stumps.
The timber all gone. And another thing, these timber people were, well, shall we say, up to their, what shall we say, up to the top of their gut with timber.
Mm-hmm.
So they were extremely wasteful. So they'd cut a tree down. They'd cut all the trees down. But if the tree was in any way had a flaw in it, whatever the flaw, you let that log lay there. They just took the best logs
Mm-hmm.
the way they went. So Dad, he had, rejected logs
Mm-hmm.
up to his gizzard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, so he burned all he could burn. He made firewood of all he could fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then this Lithuania real estate man helped him with a loan, money,
Mm-hmm.
so Dad could buy a team of horses, and he could buy some cattle
Mm-hmm.
and farm equipment. So Dad became a farmer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now then, was he a farmer then when you were growing up? So were you
Yeah,
living on a
by
farm?
the way, this was around 1912, 1913. In 1916, I was born.
Right.
By the way, he got married while living in Niagara Falls and had me.
Right.
So I was born in 1916,
Right.
and Dad worked in the factory until 1920,
Mm-hmm.
and he hated factory.
Right.
So the Lithuanian real estate man
Right.
came along and talked him into a lot of cheap land in Michigan.
Right. Yeah. We've covered that part now. We've gotten through that part of the story. We've gotten you basically to the point where he now has his farm, he has his equipment and his horses and cows. So we've got that covered now. And then I guess what I'm most interested in trying to get to is sort of more of your own story here. You've given us some good background now on your father and the family. So basically, you grew up then in this part of Michigan,
Yeah,
in Mason County
I
here.
grew up
Talk a little louder to him.
Okay.
Probably a little slower.
south of Custer.
Right. Okay. Now, did you finish high school here?
Yes, I graduated from Custer High School about 1936.
Okay. And then, what kind of work did you do when you graduated?
When I graduated from high school,
Yeah. What kind of work did you do then?
well, I helped Dad farm.
Mm-hmm.
See, I graduated from high school, And I went to Custer High School, and well, I went there until I reached the senior year, and in the senior year, the superintendent came along, asked me, "What are you going to do when we're going to graduate from Custer High School?" I said, I don't know. I'm going to help Dad farm. And he stood up, he says, "No, you aren't." And I got stuck. What am I going to do? You're not going to farm. And I was dreaming about clearing land and helping Dad farm.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guy says, "You're not going to farm." Well, what'll I do? I said, "You're going to college." Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, I had in mind, that kids went to college after school, after graduating from Custer High School.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't plan to go to college. Dad was clearing land. He was pulling stumps. Of course, he was dynamiting stumps, and I helped him with dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
So I says, "Well, I want to help Dad farm." He says, "Well, you go to college. I want you to go to college." He didn't say it. He says, "You're going to college, and once you get graduated, you'll help your dad in a better way than you are going to help him now."
Mm-hmm.
Then I just, I thought about going to college. I thought that was a dream that's completely out of my reach. But he says, "I'm going to help you go to college." I says, "You will?" He says, "Yes." He says, "I know the dean there, the dean of men. I know the registrar. I know all the leading people at Western Michigan." He says, "And I will arrange for you to go there."
Mm-hmm.
So I got so surprised, "You're going to college." Well, and I was that kind of a guy that if somebody told me to do something forcefully, I did it.
Okay.
I think even if he says, "You're going to rob a bank," I might have done it. Well, that's a little carrying it too
All
far.
right. Okay. So he sent you off to Western Michigan University then?
Well, he says, he says, "You're going to college." And I says, "Where?" He says, "You're going to Western Michigan University." He says, "I went there, I know the dean, and I will make all the arrangements for you to go there. I'll send all the records." He says, "But you gotta earn some money." And then he says, "Where do you think you can get a job? It takes money to go to college." So I scratched my head. And what could I say? Well, finally I said, I know somebody from Livingston who works on PM car ferries. And they hire people for, they need people, and they can get you a job on the boats. So the superintendent says, "Well, he says, do you know somebody that can get you a job?" I says, "Well, I know somebody that works on the car ferries in Livingston that says that they need extra labor in the summertime." He says, "Well, if you know him, are you going to go ask him?" Well, I said, "I don't know. I have no way to get to Livingston, and my dad needs me on the farm, so I guess even if I want to do other things, I have to help my dad farm." And he stood up, he says, "Your dad will make out real well." And I said, "He will? How?" He said, "You will help him by going to college, and you'll get a job, better job, and you'll help him. And I was stuck. You're going to college. And what college would you like to go to? You know, just like that. He's going to hit me in the face or something. What college would you like to go to? Well, I didn't know anything about colleges, but I knew that the superintendent himself graduated from Western Michigan College. So the only thing I could say, not knowing any colleges, I wanted to say something that would please him. He said, I'd like to go to Western Michigan University. He says, fine. He shook my hand. He says, I went there, I graduated from there. He says, I know the dean. I'm going to make all the arrangements for you to go. And you see, I was number 2 graduate in, from the high school. So he liked my record, and so he says, I know the dean in bed,
Right.
Dean Pellet.
Okay. Like you've told us that now. You've told us that part, and then you told us about maybe working on the boats in Ludington. Did you go to Ludington and work on the car ferry?
Yes.
Okay.
I worked on the car ferries, yes. This was after I decided to go to college.
Right.
See?
Right.
And
then did you make money? Did you then go to college after you made some money?
yes,
Okay.
the superintendent says,
Right.
"Do you know anybody that works on the car ferries?" I said, "Yes. There's a guy that used to come to our place. See, we lived by a lake, and he came fishing all the time, and he worked on the car ferries. And he says, you know him? Yeah, I know him. What does he do?" I said, "He works on a car ferry." Do you think he could help you get a job on a boat? I says, maybe, if I asked him. Yeah, well, he says, where does he live? I said, he lives in Ludington. What's his name? Blah, blah, blah. He says, well, you're going to ask him to help you get a job on the boat. And I said to him, but I have no way to see him. You know, I don't drive. Here's a telephone. He says, and what's his name? Blah, 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 blah. He looked it up, gave me the number. He says, here's his number. You call him up. Just like that. Because if I wasn't going to call him up, he would have hit me. So I called him up and I asked him, well, I understand that you work on the boats, and I understand that you that in the summertime you hire extra help. Would it be possible for me to get a job on the boat? And he said, yes. Summer comes, we need lots of extra help for the tourist trade. So I said, is it possible for me to get a job there? Yes, you come right now. See, the school is out. He says, we are hiring. So that way I went home and told my folks, and they went to ask this guy that worked on the boat to give me a job, and got me a job on the boat.
Okay. Now, were you in college at the time that you got drafted?
Yes. I think I had my 4th year. I was 4th year in college, and I got drafted.
Right. And so that's 1941? Before Pearl Harbor then?
Yeah, it was about 1941, and
And then when they drafted you, where did they send you? Where did you go for training?
well, I have to think a little bit.
Now, were you with the 32nd Infantry Division for a while?
Okay, yes. I got assigned to the 32nd Infantry Division at Camp Livingston, Louisiana.
Right.
That's where they had the infantry camp.
Right.
Okay, by the way, this was my 4th year in college.
Mm-hmm.
See, I went 4 years to college.
Mm-hmm.
Then the war came along, and the draft, took hold, and I got drafted. So I had my 4 years in college, and I couldn't go to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
The Army grabbed me
Mm-hmm.
and put me in the 32nd Infantry Division.
Right. Now, what do you remember about Camp Livingston? What kind of place was that?
Well, Camp Livingston was a camp where the troops predominantly lived in tents,
Mm-hmm.
predominantly. And they had a few barracks, and half the troops in the barracks, half of them in tents. And it was an infantry division.
Mm-hmm.
And I became an infantryman, and they assigned me to the heavy weapons company and became a machine gunner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here I was getting into my military, getting my, my time in.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of details I can't tell
Right.
you, it's too long ago. But, so I was getting my training, the expert machine gunner, but we were not at war then,
Right.
see? So, but war in Europe was raging,
Right.
but we were not in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that much I can tell you. Okay, so I was getting into my, 3rd or 4th year as a machine gunner, ready, had my time in, and Pearl Harbor came along.
Mm-hmm.
So Pearl Harbor, and Roosevelt says, now that we have been attacked, we are in it for the duration.
Right.
And anybody that was ready to get discharged will have to stay in and
Right. Because there was the draft was originally for about 1 year or something like that, and so you
draft
thought you were going to get to go
in
home.
for 1 year,
Mhm.
yes. And it was in that 1 year that the Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. And then you were
I
stuck.
don't know the date. You
Right.
probably have
December
to know the
7th,
date.
1941. Yeah. So
now I'll have to search a little more for details.
now,
So,
when did you know when you switched out of the infantry and went into the Air Corps?
okay, so Pearl Harbor happened, and I was an infantryman.
Right.
So along, Roosevelt came along. He says, now that we've been attacked, and by a Japanese Air Force, and he says, our Air Force is pretty much deficient.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to, order the 5,000 plane Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
He says, anybody that's already in the service, and if he can qualify the physical,
Mm-hmm.
must be allowed to transfer from the infantry into the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at that, oh boy, a chance to get out of the infantry. And I was about 1 year in the infantry, you know. So I went and took the tests, and says, you're first class. Says, you're the kind of guy we need in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so out of the when I told the first sergeant, and handed him my
Your orders? Or?
my orders that Roosevelt said that anybody that can qualify, that's already in the Air Force, not Air Force,
Right.
in the service,
Right.
and if they're qualified, pass the physical, they must be allowed to transfer out. So, and it reminded the first sergeant of that, and he says, yeah, I heard that. We can't keep you.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta let you go. So I transferred into the Air Force.
Okay. Now, where did the Air Force send you for training?
Well,
Or did you go a lot of places?
Yeah. So I wanted to, you know, all I heard about the Air Force was pilots,
Right.
pilots.
Right.
I never heard of anything else but
Mhm.
pilots. So, how? I just got to get some details here. So I was in the Air Force now because they had to let me go.
Mm-hmm.
And what will I do in the Air Force? So I took a variety of physicals,
Mm-hmm.
and after these physicals, the sergeant would say, this guy will be a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
This guy will be a bombardier. And this guy will be a navigator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, but Maleckas, you'll be a navigator. So, I don't know why they chose me as a navigator, but
They did.
they did. I mean, we took all kinds of physicals. See?
Mm-hmm.
So on the basis on these physicals, whoever it was decided who will be a bombardier,
Mm-hmm.
navigator, and a pilot.
Right.
So I was to be a
A navigator. Right.
I couldn't argue.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Orders is orders.
okay. Now, what did a navigator have to do? What was your job as a navigator?
Well, of course, I want to tell you this much. Our bombers were long-range bombers, you know. They could fly all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and stuff like that. Okay. So, then they got to do this thing, daylight or darkness,
Mm-hmm.
and good weather or bad weather. So, and of course, a pilot, of course, you know what he has to do, he has to handle the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But after the plane is in the air, where will you go?
Right.
Especially when there's thousands of islands and over water and over strange. So they need a navigator, so we have a navigator. And Maleckas, you'll be a navigator. Nothing I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So once you're, well, to make a long story short, I became a navigator,
Mm-hmm.
and I was assigned to B-24 bombers, and to make the long story short. So,
Do you know about how long you were in training to be a navigator before they sent you anywhere? Was it about a year or?
well, see, it took probably about 6 months.
Okay.
I'm just giving you a rough figure. About 6 months to be a navigator.
Okay. And did they send you to different air bases while you were training? So you went different parts of the country, or did you stay in one place?
To become a navigator?
Yeah.
No. To be a navigator, I flew only a plane that was specifically designed to train navigators.
Right.
So, and to go from here to here, you use the same navigation system,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what kind of plane you flew.
Right.
B-17, B-24, any kind of a transport.
Now, do you remember where the navigator school was? Where were you trained for that?
One was, I can only give you Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay.
There was a navigation training there.
Okay.
Monroe, Louisiana.
Right.
But they had navigation schools in various,
Mhm.
you know, other airports.
Right.
Same with pilots. They
Mhm.
had pilot training
Yeah.
schools. Various.
No.
Same with bombardiers. But you said you're going to be a navigator, so
Mhm.
that's all. I can't.
Now, did they train you to do things like read the stars so you could know where you were at night and that kind of thing?
Oh yes. To be a navigator, we had to fly all kinds of weather, daylight or darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned to navigate daylight, darkness,
Mm-hmm.
good weather, bad weather, and and at night, and at night we had to learn a special system, which is called celestial navigation.
Mm-hmm.
You heard of that?
Right. That's follow the stars.
What?
You have to read the stars.
Yeah. We navigated like Columbus navigated by their plotting their position
Mm-hmm.
by what the stars showed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to navigate. And the other way, of course, was what shall we call? Well, broadcasting stations around the country. They were broadcasting, and we were taught to pick out the frequency
Mm-hmm.
of all these different broadcasting stations.
Right.
And you probably know about it.
Mm-hmm. Sort of the radio direction finding systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you tune into one station and you compute and get their direction.
Right.
Then you turn into another one,
Mm-hmm.
get another one.
Right.
And then the third one, you get three, so you draw a line,
Mm-hmm.
a line from here, a line from here, a line from here, and where the lines intersect, that's where you are.
Right.
That's your position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had to do that quickly
Mm-hmm.
because you're flying 200 miles an hour.
Right.
See? So, you find your position, of course, then you know where you are and you notify the pilot and he'll make his adjustments. And so, and of course, navigation became very critical over ocean flying.
Sure.
See, where there were no radio aids. Then we had the sun
Mm-hmm.
and the moon if he was out, the sun, the moon, and at night, boom, hundreds of stars.
Mm-hmm.
So we navigated by stars at night like Columbus
Mm-hmm.
navigated by stars.
Now, before they shipped you overseas, did they have your crew together? Were you assigned a group of men to work with now on one airplane?
Well, before going, well, after you get your navigation wings, our
Mhm.
qualified navigator, let's see, then you are assigned to operating units, bomb group,
Mhm.
bomb squadron.
Right.
So we got after navigation, graduation, and there were dozens of bomb groups. The Air Force had
Mm-hmm.
about 10,000 planes. Well, so I was assigned to the 13th Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
which is a heavy bombardment group, B-24s. Well, I guess I don't have it.
Oh.
You know,
That's one thing that people will be able to look up. They can go find themselves a picture of a B-24, but a big 4-engine bomber.
Yeah, it's a B. And another 4-engine bomber was the B-17,
Right.
Flying Fortress,
Mm-hmm.
and then the B-24 heavy bomber, and then toward the end of the war, the B-29
Right.
came into service. But of course, I had my B-24 duty
Right.
completed.
Right. Okay. Now, what can you tell us about the men in your crew?
Men in the group.
The men in your crew. You're assigned to a bomber with a particular group of men, aren't you? You have the same pilot and co-pilot and bombardier, and there's a group of you who will fly together?
Yeah, the plane had a crew of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just unfortunately don't have a... Yeah, crew of 10.
Mhm.
pilot, co-pilot, and the bombardier and the navigator. That's 4, and then 6 gunners.
Right.
Guy
Yeah.
shot forward, guys that shot upward, guy that shot downward, guy that shot airward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about 6 gunners and 4 officers.
Right. And the navigator is one of the flight officers. So you
The
get to be a second
navigator
lieutenant
was one
then.
of the officers,
Mhm.
because I guess bombers, they were long-range machines. They fly all the way across the Atlantic, which is what is it,
About 3,000 miles, yeah.
Flew across the Pacific, which is 6,000
Mhm.
miles, and then you not only fly in the daytime, you fly in darkness
Mhm.
too. So we were an aerial navigator was, trained to fly under all kinds
Right.
of conditions.
Right. Okay. Now, do you remember who your first pilot was?
Well, the first pilot, I'll tell you the story. Alden A. Allman.
Okay.
Now, I got him named Alden after him.
Mm-hmm.
Alden Allman. I don't know if I have a picture of.
You did in the other room, but that's okay. Just tell us a little bit about him.
Well, first of pretty hard to tell, it's a long time ago, but he was from Santa Ana, California, and he was, a college graduate, and he was an officer and a first pilot, and of course he and I, what shall we say, I don't like to say fell in love with each other, but we just became one.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't fly without me, and I couldn't fly without him. See, we depended on each other
Mm-hmm.
so much. So we got assigned to a crew of 10.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we flew together,
Mm-hmm.
just like a football team,
Right.
Crew of 12. We were a crew of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So
So you're assigned to the 13th Air Force then. So
Well-
that's going into the Pacific, right?
well, that went to Pacific, but before going to Pacific, we had to train how to fly this plane
Mm-hmm.
and learn to navigate.
Right.
So when we finished and graduated, shall we say, as a qualified crew
Mm-hmm.
to go, so
Okay.
got the whole story there? Okay.
Okay. So this basically, I guess, your story has you're sort of trained as the crew initially in Kansas. You fly out of Topeka, and then you
So-
go on to Colorado, and you get your plane.
Yeah, well, I became a qualified crew, so it flew from, I don't know, it's a air base somewhere in Chicago. And we were assigned to fly, what shall we say?
You were in Topeka, Kansas, Dad, and you were being assigned to pick up a new airplane in
Okay.
Colorado.
Now we got it. We were assigned to pick up a new airplane, to become a combat crew.
Right.
So we took off, I think it's a air base in Chicago, near Chicago. And we took off in a storm, ice storm. And of course the pilot went to the operations and objected. He said, "This is not flying weather."
Mm-hmm.
But the commanding officer says, you climb so high, and you'll climb out of this bad weather, and you have good weather to fly all the way.
Mm-hmm.
But the pilot objected. He says, "But suppose, what trouble will I have getting up into that safe altitude? Well, he says, you got orders, and you should be able to get through the storm into the clear. Okay, orders is orders. So away we went. But if I remember, it was already raining
Right.
when we took off. Is that mentioned in the book?
Yeah. Yes. It's
Okay.
raining and freezing rain, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was already raining, but on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
it was not freezing.
Okay.
But when we got up, at altitude, where it got colder, then the rain was still rain, but when it hit something, it froze.
Mm-hmm.
So, all the raindrops that hit our airplane became ice. And if you understand flying, the leading edge began to build up ice. But I don't know why. You would think that when the ice built up on the leading edge, it would come out pointed.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is the leading edge, the ice built up this way. Do you ever remember about? Okay. See, instead of the sharp edge flying into the air, it was this kind.
So you had sort of a flat, almost like a wall going into the air
just
instead?
like a board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I did that, but we reached, flying altitude, and by the time we reached that flying altitude to head for,
Or Colorado was where you were going.
yeah, and we had orders to pick up a new airplane. I don't know where, but somewhere in Colorado. And, well, again, there's so much that I forgot.
But you've got the ice on the wing. What did the ice on the wing, what did that do to the plane?
Okay. So we reached altitude, flying altitude, and of course then I gave the pilot the directions, and the time of arrival and all the things that the navigator does. And we began to fly, but the plane did not fly smooth.
Mm-hmm.
It vibrated like
Right.
that. More and more and more and more. And then the pilot says, I gotta climb out of this thing. But he got so much ice on the wings that the plane wouldn't fly. I mean,
Wouldn't
it
go
flew,
up.
but
Yeah.
it didn't climb.
Mm-hmm.
So when he couldn't climb, he picked up more ice. And he picked up more ice, the plane lost its lifting altitude, lifting power.
Right.
See, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it began to nose down.
Mm-hmm.
See, so we were at about 8,000 feet. Maybe it gives you the details there. 8,000 feet, but we can't maintain that altitude.
Mm-hmm.
So the pilot lost his ability to keep it in the air, and the plane began to spin and head downward fast. So I looked at the altimeter, and I could see my altimeter unwinding like that.
Right.
See, 8,000 feet,
Mm-hmm.
7,000 feet, 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet. I said, my golly, we're flying straight down. And the pilot gives a ring. All crew put on parachutes. Yeah. And he said, and I'll give orders to bail. Okay. So we put on our chutes, got ready to bail, and I, being a navigator, put my eyes on the altimeter, and I see the altimeter doing this. 7,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 5,000 feet. I said, my golly, we are flying straight down. And by the way, we were in the, what shall we say, in the soup, we were in the clouds.
Right.
We couldn't see the sky, we couldn't see, but we were going down like that. And I said to myself, the pilot should give us orders to bail out.
Right.
But he gave us a signal, all crew put on chutes. So we put on our chutes. I put on my chute. And then, of course, I waited for orders, or orders should pilot give us a ring,
Right.
bail out, abandon ship. But it never came. So I looked, I was getting lower and lower. I says, my golly, we're too low
Mm-hmm.
to be, to be flying. So I just pulled the Bombay door open and I bailed out. And as soon as I bailed out, opened my chute came open, and right under me, that plane went down
Mm-hmm.
and blew up. It hit the ground and blew up. And some of the men were already bailing out,
Mm-hmm.
but they bailed out too late. And I was the only guy that bailed out on time.
Mm-hmm.
So we lost the whole crew.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tragedy of it all.
Mm-hmm.
So we lost. We had 11 men aboard. 11 aboard. We lost 10 of them. I think that will be described. Was it described in there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's in the book. Okay. So then they had to get you with a new crew at that point?
Well, then I was, what you might call emotionally wrecked,
Right.
because you don't see 10 men right in front of your eyes,
Mhm.
smash and blow up. It's an emotional, what do you call it? Emotional shock.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed in hospital and I shook for a week, and finally settled down. Took another physical, and the doctor says you're fit for flying.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought to myself, if the doctor says I'm fit for flying, I must be fit for flying, even if I don't feel fit for flying.
Mm-hmm.
So I got another crew and another story, and I finally ended up in the Pacific, where I had to bail out again, this time in the ocean.
Now, was this after you had gotten based somewhere in the Pacific? Was this later on, or was this before you got to a base?
Well, this was before I got to the Pacific. I mean, before I shipped overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to hospital, and I guess in about 2 weeks, I was declared fit for flying. See?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now I can't give you the details of how many different planes I flew with,
Mhm.
but eventually, well, I got assigned to a crew, and I was getting, become, one of the crew members,
Mhm.
ready to go overseas. And I don't know if it's described in the book. Oh. Anyway, somehow I got assigned to a crew, and the details, how I got there, I couldn't tell. I don't remember. But anyway, I got assigned to a crew and did eventually got into combat,
Mm-hmm.
in the Solomon Islands
Okay.
campaign.
Right. So you're getting out there maybe in 1943? Is that
Somewhere,
right? Yeah.
the dates are not in my head.
Now, were you based on Guadalcanal first?
Yeah, well, let's see. Well, my combat was on Guadalcanal.
Mhm.
Yes, combat, and we were loading up on bombers. I mean, loading up with bombs, and doing our combat duty. And of course, in combat, you're attacked by the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and you're shooting back. So
Right.
It was no picnic.
Mm-hmm.
It was just
What kind of missions did you have? What sort of targets did you have to go after?
well, our targets were enemy facilities,
Mm-hmm.
airports, harbors, and their air bases.
Mm-hmm.
So our job was mostly to bomb the enemy's air bases.
Mm-hmm.
See, they had about on the Pacific Islands, and they had some islands that one of them I think was Truck.
Right.
You ever Truck?
Yeah, Truck Atoll. Yeah.
Okay, so I even had a chance to fly to Truck and circle to
Mm-hmm.
to see what they were doing there. And somehow we did not get any orders to drop bombs on them, so we just did our reconnaissance
Mhm.
and flew back. So I've seen Truck.
Mm-hmm. And then would you have attacked places like Rabaul, which was a big Japanese base there on New Britain, or
I know Rabaul, but I don't think we did any combat on Rabaul.
mm-hmm.
If I did, I don't remember.
Okay.
But 90% of my bombing was from in the Solomon Island group.
Okay. So you were attacking on Bougainville or some of the other islands where the
That's right.
Japanese were?
Yeah, Bougainville, Guadalcanal. There's a whole string of islands.
Yeah.
I can't remember their names now.
Yeah.
Do you remember the names?
Not all of
Well,
them.
Choiseul was another one that
Right.
shows up in your book.
The what?
Choiseul, it's like Choiseul.
Oh, Choiseul.
Yeah.
Yeah, Choiseul they call it.
Oh, okay.
Choiseul.
Yeah. See, I'm a French historian, so I want to get the names right. Bougainville, Choiseul, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, we attacked Choiseul too. Yeah, that was one of our bombing targets.
Mm-hmm.
Choiseul.
Were there any? Did you encounter any enemy airplanes?
Oh yeah, every time we bombed the Bougainville,
Mm-hmm.
Choiseul, we always ran into Jap fighters, which
Mhm.
did their thing.
How about flak?
What?
Flak.
Flak?
Yeah, shooting at you from the ground.
Oh boy. Always flak. Yes, indeed. If it's a target on the ground, which of course was the Japanese air base,
Mm-hmm.
they defended it with all. So they defended their bases
Right.
with anti-aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
aircraft and artillery. So we got a lot of those.
Okay. Now, did your plane get hit?
Oh yeah, we'd often come home with. You see, when the anti-aircraft shell explodes,
Mm-hmm.
it shoots shrapnel all
Right.
over the place, and we came home with shrapnel holes often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but never, hit in a vital place where
Right.
we had to go down.
Mm-hmm.
But we did find once lost a motor. For some reason one of the engines got hit, so
Mm-hmm.
we slowed down and got home on 3 engines. But we had, shall I say, in my outfit, just holes in the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But our neighbors, some that were next to us, they finally got hit and went down.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how many crews you flew with in the Solomons?
How many crews?
Cruise.
Well, I can't tell you how many different crews, but I think in combat, I flew a lot of reconnaissance,
Mm-hmm.
lots of reconnaissance. No, I can't give you the number.
Okay. Now, did you fly more reconnaissance missions than other navigators, do you think, or were you all doing about the same?
I don't know about this more, but I can say I flew a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of. We took turns,
Okay.
but reconnaissance was one of the major jobs because we wanted to see where the enemy was.
Right. How far could you fly on one of those missions? Or how long?
Well, again, it's about 7 or 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
for a mission. It takes, well, takeoff time, then you got to fly around to assemble,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Then, of course, you do your thing. And
Mm-hmm.
well, a mission always took us about 7, 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
altogether. And then if it required reconnaissance, it took longer, 10, 12 hours.
Mm-hmm. So you might fly as far as 1,000 miles away from your base?
Well, we flew a lot of reconnaissance,
Mhm.
1,000 miles
Right,
away from
yeah.
the base. But combat, where we actually dropped bombs,
Mm-hmm.
the farthest one was about 500 miles.
Right. Because you've got a heavier load and you have to fly in a formation and wait for the other planes and
Formation.
all that kind of thing. Now, when you were flying the bombing missions, did you have fighter protection? Were there American fighters there to help you? Okay. Now, as the campaigning went on, did the number of Japanese planes go down, or were they always able to come after you?
They were always there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, our reconnaissance, our fighters
Mm-hmm.
took them on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that made the Jap attacks to defend themselves from our fighters.
Mhm.
So they very seldom hit us.
Mm-hmm.
But if I remember that our planes somehow or other came back full of holes.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how it got there. But
Do you remember how many combat missions you had?
Okay. So about how many combat missions then did you fly? About 20 or 30 or?
a little less than 20 combat.
Okay. And then maybe how many reconnaissance missions?
Oh, reconnaissance. I could just probably 20 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of reconnaissance. And because, we were in an area where the Japanese Navy was active.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to, be alert to know where they are.
Right.
See? So sometimes we fly out 1,000 miles and see nothing.
Mm-hmm. Now, were there times when you flew out and actually saw their fleet or saw something you weren't looking for?
Yeah, we saw, and only once we got shot at,
Mm-hmm.
but other times for some reason, we kept our distance,
Mm-hmm.
and we did not get shot at, and once we did get shot at.
Now, do you remember what kinds of ships you were seeing? I mean, were you seeing aircraft carriers or transports or battleships?
Well, I can tell you that, there were a great variety of them. There were, the Japs, had outposts
Mm-hmm.
all over the Pacific and had to do all kinds of shipping
Right.
to supply them,
Mm-hmm.
To reinforce them and things like that. That's all I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you about that. And the Pacific Ocean is a big ocean. So only, I guess, once or twice we flew over a shipment of Japs that they shot back, but
Mhm.
that's minor.
Right. Not as bad as the anti-aircraft coming from an air base or something like that.
Yeah, that's
Now, when you were on the reconnaissance missions, did you ever encounter Japanese fighters?
no fighters, no.
Okay.
But we encountered their shipping.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's what we're out there for.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when you flew the reconnaissance missions, then you didn't carry any bombs. You just
Yeah, we carried bombs.
and would you ever attack anything if you saw anything?
Yes, we had orders to attack if we saw something worth attacking.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, on a reconnaissance always, you know, are long distances.
Right.
And to fly long distances, you had to carry less load.
Right.
And on reconnaissance, we were the, what you might call, the eyes and the ears
Mm-hmm.
of the military.
Mhm.
The eyes and the ears. We gotta know where the enemy is. And the Pacific Ocean is big.
Mm-hmm.
So the flying time is often very long.
Now, when you were out there, did your plane fly out of Guadalcanal, or did it fly from other islands too?
Well, yes, but I can't name them. Guadalcanal was probably 80 or 90% of our flights.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's New Hebrides that we flew from.
Right. Because we were using the New Hebrides bases even before we had a big base on Guadalcanal.
What is it?
Well, the New Hebrides base we were using first, and then
Yeah.
eventually when we had Guadalcanal secure enough, they brought bigger and bigger planes in, and so
Yeah.
you'd be in those places. Hmm. Did you think you went any farther north than Guadalcanal?
No.
Well, were you based any farther north than Guadalcanal or not?
No.
Okay. How long did you stay on active duty flying the planes out there? Was it until the end of the war, or did you leave earlier than that?
Well, I was in the Air Force to the very end of the war,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the war, I was in the training command,
Mm-hmm.
and I flew training planes, and we trained navigators
Right.
and pilots.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you know about when you started at the training command? Was that in 1945, or did you get there earlier? Or do you think you were doing that for a few months or for longer?
well, in the training, I don't think I'd spent more than a year.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's very difficult to distinguish training from, actual, what we'd call it, actual operations.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes your actual operations and training are together.
Right. Now, were you training people back in the United States, or were you still out?
Well, to come back to the United States, I came back by hospital ship.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, had you been?
You might explain why you were coming back by hospital
Yeah.
ship.
Had you had a second crash? Because you told us about the crash in the United States before you went overseas. But then were you in a second crash later on?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And that's putting you, I guess,
No, I
Near-
guess if it's,
near Choiseul and... Because that also seems to be where you got hurt, too, because you mentioned you have a Purple Heart as well. And
well, the Purple Heart, I guess, was from combat operations.
right.
Yeah, but I don't remember which one.
You were in a formation, and you either evaded another aircraft or you got hit by flak, and you heard this chain-like sound on your fuselage. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember a lot of little detail like that, yeah.
And then you were tumbling through the air and you found out that the back of your airplane was missing,
Yeah.
and you fell out of the airplane, and what happened then?
I don't know.
And you were trying to pull the ripcord on your parachute, and you couldn't do it because of lack of oxygen. And when you finally fell through the air long enough so the oxygen increased, you were able to pull your ripcord. Do you remember that?
Very vaguely, yes.
And then when you pulled the ripcord, you realized that you hadn't buckled your entire parachute to your body. You remember that?
Yeah,
And then what happened after that?
I don't know.
And you were in the water. You fell in the water. You were in the Pacific.
Oh yeah, I did a lot of water time, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the details.
How did you get rescued? Or who rescued you? A PT boat or seaplane or...
I don't know.
Do you remember the B-24 that went over you and dropped the life raft to you?
Yeah,
Do you remember what happened to the life raft?
I don't think we found it.
That's right, because the person who dropped you the life raft forgot to pull the inflating
See?
mechanism. Now, you remember that?
Yeah,
So what happened after that?
I don't know. I just kept on swimming.
Okay. Did you have your Mae West or your life jacket?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Did you have a life raft?
I don't know.
Did you see any oxygen bottles floating on the water, and
Yeah.
you used your shoestrings to tie them to your
Yes,
body?
I did. Yeah, there now. With my shoestrings, I tied some oxygen bottles together, and to hang on to
Mm-hmm.
for better floating. Yeah. But the thing is that the oxygen bottles, well, they're about that
Mm-hmm.
long, that big around, and they had outlets on the
Mhm.
ends. So I tried to make can't call it a raft, with shoestrings tied
Mhm.
together. But eventually, the water seeps into the end,
Mm-hmm.
and they become,
Full of water and they
yeah,
sink.
they cease floating.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of your other crew members survive?
Well, as far as I know, I had no other survivors.
Mm-hmm.
You remember how long you were in the water?
No,
It was about 2 days.
I don't know.
Do you remember what happened at the end? You saw this island?
Gee whiz, I don't. Well, is that mentioned in the book?
Yes. Did you see the highway on the island, and the doors open up? Do you remember that?
Not anymore.
Okay. Well, anyway, he saw angels.
Oh, angels, yeah,
You talk about the submarine you saw.
yeah.
Okay, tell him about it.
Well, I don't remember those. But about the angels flying, while I was in the water, they would talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they would, I don't know, on their feet they had wings.
Mm-hmm.
And with those wings they were able to, skip along on the water. Yeah, but those are, what do I call them, what do you call them, visions?
Okay, but whatever. What did you think you saw?
Well, I don't know.
What did the angels say to you? Or what did you think they said to you?
Well, they said that do whatever you think you have to do. We will not desert you. We will be with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
See, we will be with you all the time.
And then did a submarine come up?
Well, I don't know about the submarine. Did it was a submarine?
Well, part of his vision, whatever he saw this island, and he was approaching it, and there was traffic on the island. He could see the lights.
Mm-hmm.
And then a door opened on the side of the island, and a submarine came out.
Oh yeah, visions.
Mm.
And then the angels came and talked to him.
See, wait a minute. That island was Choiseul.
That's correct. And then why did the angels come and say that they would be with you always?
Why?
Yes.
Well, it says we will not desert you. We will be with you all the time.
And what were you going to do?
Well, one of the things I was planning to do is to drown myself.
Mm-hmm.
And why were you going to do that?
Oh, because I lost my strength. I couldn't, I've been swimming so long that there were no longer any strength. But the angels would say, we'll be with you all the time, and now that's kind of a, they had wings, then they had wings on their shoes, so they'd skip around, choop, 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 on top of the water. But again, I don't think that was true. It was just a vision.
Okay. So what did you do after you talked to the angels? Did you give up?
Well, after they talked to the angels, I did not think about giving up. I just kept right on.
And then what happened?
I don't know.
You said previously that you had given up and you quit swimming and you let your feet down to sink down into the ocean. What happened?
Well, then I touched ground.
Oh, you found an island after all.
Yeah. See those little details?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, visions. Before I got to the island, I think I heard Japanese, motor vehicles. A lot of traffic on the island. But after I got on the island, there was no traffic.
Mm-hmm. Don't think they had a lot of highways on Choiseul at that point. Probably still don't.
Well, Choiseul, of course, we call it Choiseul or Choiseul. It was a kind of a, what shall we say, undeveloped island. Undeveloped. They had no cities on it, except probably little dinky villages.
And then, once you actually made it onto shore, who did you meet? Was it locals or Allied personnel, or were the natives there, or who did you find? Or who found you?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I found anybody.
How much time do we have?
Plenty.
Okay. You made it to the island, and what was the first thing you did?
I don't know.
You slept.
Oh, I slept, yeah, because I had all my strength going, see, or my energy.
Right?
Yeah, I know that, and I know other things, like I was prepared to beat the Japs if I encounter them. But all that time I was awful weak, see, and not only weak, but very sleepy because I had out in the ocean. I haven't slept for
A couple of days.
a couple of days, yeah. So when it comes to remembering things, they just weren't there
Right.
unless they were, real. What shall we say? Real sharp things.
You remember what you ate?
What I ate? Oh my. Well, I ate, what shall we say, kind of plants that I could find on the growing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I shot a fish once. I don't know. But yeah, once on the island, you know, I was able to find. Well, I don't know what those plants were, but if they pull them up by the roots, if there's something
Mm-hmm.
there dangling to eat,
Mm-hmm.
I ate them, or I could eat. Well,
Did you find anything in the ocean like crabs or shellfish or anything like that?
yeah, there were crabs. I mean, with claws, you
Mhm.
know, and you pull the claw off, and then bit into it,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the bone is on the outside.
Right.
But when you bite into it, inside it's got
That's the meat.
some kind of meat
Right.
or juice too.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about those too.
Do you remember when you saw the natives the first time?
I saw them first time, but I don't remember.
They were out in the water.
Oh, out in the ocean. Yeah. That was on the. Now that you mention it, that was. Well, on the west, on the east end of Choiseul. But I don't remember much more about them.
And you were standing on the beach waving to them,
Yeah.
and they didn't know what to do because they didn't know who you were, because you were sunburned and skinny and
Mm-hmm.
might have been a Japanese.
So you better read that book.
And did they come in to pick you up? And they picked you up,
I don't remember that.
and they took care of you.
Well, the natives, once I got into the native hands,
Mm-hmm.
my worries were all over
Mm-hmm.
because they just anticipated what I wanted and got it for me. So being with the natives was just like being with our own family.
Mm-hmm.
See. Now, yeah, I remember there's things that started to come back. But there was one, gee, I forget his name. We forget his name. Well, I can't tell you anymore about
Okay,
it.
one of the natives was a doctor, and he was educated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. See, he remembers.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the.
In the book. Okay.
And remember how the natives went fishing? Hand grenades?
Well, yeah, now, one little incident that, yes, I remember, where, you know, a couple of boats went out, you know, with the natives in them,
Mm-hmm.
and they had grenades.
Mm-hmm.
You know what those are?
Sure.
Yeah. And they saw a pool of fish, they threw a grenade, threw a bomb in there,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, the bomb would splash and sink, and the fish would all run to it
Mm-hmm.
to see what happened. And you know, after after a while, after all the fish all around, the bomb would go off, and then pretty soon a bunch of fish would be floating belly
Mm-hmm.
up, stunned.
Right.
Yeah, some of them were killed, but a lot of them would, you know,
Just be stunned by
soon
the shock.
recover
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
float away. But still, the natives got enough fish to,
Mhm.
you know, to prepare a meal once they got ashore.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you remember?
I forgot about that.
Do you remember how you wound up getting off of the island? Were there any Allied personnel there? Was there any Army or Navy or coastwatcher or anyone like that there?
The coastwatcher was there. He was one of the, what shall we say, New Zealanders or
Mhm. Yeah.
Australians.
Australian or New Zealander, yeah.
Yeah. So each island had one of those,
Mhm.
you know, to organize the natives and
Right.
offer assistance to guys like
Mm-hmm.
myself. Yeah. See, and I forgot his name.
I forgot his name too.
That's okay. He's probably in the book. Let's see now.
Nick somebody.
Okay. Now, was he happy to see you, or did you get in the way?
No, I was, as I remember, I was already established,
Mm-hmm.
and they finally come out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these people were, shall we say, in peacetime they were kind of entrepreneurs on the island.
Mm-hmm.
Peacetime. Then the war come along, and they got stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember much about them.
They had a radio on there. Then they you received some information that they needed a Japanese prisoner,
Oh, now that,
and they also you were trying to get off the island, and they were making calls on the radio to get you off. So how
Yeah,
did those
let me
two
see.
events come together? Do you remember?
yeah, now that you mentioned that, yeah, this guy was, I think they call him coastwatchers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, coastwatchers. They were just, when the war broke out, they were some kind of business people or plantation.
Right. And they got trapped on. They got stuck on the
Trapped
island,
on the island,
and
yeah.
some of them stayed and helped. Yeah.
So they either did not choose to be evacuated or couldn't evacuate. So they established themselves to you know, to do what they can.
Yeah. They tracked the Japanese movements, and
So eventually, I don't know how, but they got to into a position where they were beginning to help the Allies, you know, and the guys that happened to bail out there. They call them coast watchers.
okay.
Yeah,
and I guess,
let me see.
and we wanted to know how did they get you off of the island? How did that happen?
Okay, now that he mentioned, it reminds me of the coast watchers. The coast watchers had established in very secret, you know, secretly, bases of operation on these islands. Somewhere in the deep bush, but still they had radio.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to communicate back. Yeah, they were able to do that, the coast watchers. So somehow they were able to contact our, what shall we say, our headquarters on Guadalcanal. I think that's called Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
They established that I was there.
Right.
Yeah. So, of course, when they finally, well, they would, once in a while, well, it's more complicated than that. This guy that Eldon just mentioned, he was part of the secret organization, and they established a radio, communication
Right.
centers in the island, very
Right.
secretly.
Right.
So I got in contact with one of those,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to talk by radio to our headquarters on Guadalcanal. That way, but even so, I did not get picked up very soon from, I don't know why, but they knew I was there, but they didn't hurry to come and get me. Just one guy,
Right.
and of course it's there's a certain element of risk to land,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because you didn't know what the Japanese were,
Mm-hmm.
because they were Japanese there.
Now, how did they get you off the island then? Did they send a plane or a boat or a submarine or?
Well, by plane.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, now see, now that you mentioned that, I'd forgotten it. But the seaplane eventually came,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's in the story, isn't it?
Yeah, the story was they wanted a Japanese prisoner. So the people on the island obtained a prisoner, and the way Dad got off was he accompanied the prisoner, and when they took the prisoner, and they took him too.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
There
I
we
forgot about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then when they.
that's right. You see, these native people, they had radios that they communicated with our headquarters. They
Mhm.
were pretty well organized, and so whenever our headquarters says we want some intelligent
Mhm.
information, see if you can get us some, and
Mhm.
if you can capture some, Japanese
Japanese, yeah.
prisoners, we could come and get them and and get intelligent
Right.
information from them. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. So they came over to pick him up, and they saw me. Who are you? And I couldn't figure that out. I was communicating with the base on Guadalcanal,
Mm-hmm.
and they came up and they didn't even know I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, these guys pretended I didn't know, I guess. But I got taken off,
Mhm.
real comfortably.
Right.
Yeah, they sent a seaplane over,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think they sent it for me. I don't think.
No, they sent it for the Japanese fellow, and you got to hitch a ride because you were there.
Yeah, I think the natives, communicated with our base at
Right.
and Guadalcanal, and once in a while the seaplane would come in
Mhm.
and bring up supplies.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when the seaplane, did the seaplane take you back to Guadalcanal then?
Yeah,
Okay.
they had a seaplane base on
Right, and yeah, or at Tulagi there next to it. But then, after that, did they decide that you'd flown enough missions and that you were done now?
Well, they didn't decide that. After what I went through,
Mm-hmm.
there was no more mission.
Right.
They didn't have to make a decision that
Yeah.
I'd flown enough.
Mm-hmm.
But not only flown, but we got shot down.
Mhm.
See? And I was the only survivor.
Mm-hmm.
So they had their thoughts. I guess I've had enough combat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I think I flew a reconnaissance flight. Well, I don't remember.
But that pretty well got you out of the war at that point, and then you went into a training command, and so you were training navigators,
Yeah,
and that's what you were doing when the war ended.
with training command here,
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, when the war was going favorably, I think we landed on the Philippine
Mm-hmm.
island.
Yep, we did.
So the war was going so favorably that, of course, a guy with a lot of service like myself
Mhm.
was eligible to be released.
Right.
So I don't remember all the details, but I remember getting released.
Mm-hmm. And when you got released, what did you do? Did you go home?
Well, it of course became a civilian,
Mm-hmm.
and while I was, wondering what to do, a guy came off from some school system, and they wanted, did they want a teacher or something?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So so I got a job teaching school.
And where were you teaching?
Let's see, what was I teaching?
The superintendent was a principal from Custer, became the superintendent in Frankfurt, and he hired him.
Oh, now that you
Frankfurt
mentioned
High School
Frankfurt,
system.
Mm-hmm.
Richter,
yeah,
Mr.
See?
Richter,
I forgot about that.
the one that sent you to college.
Mm-hmm.
Our Arthur Richter, superintendent, was my superintendent in Custer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He became a superintendent in Frankfurt. Now I don't know whether he knew about me or not, but he asked for me. I think he asked for me, and I went over there and zoom,
Mm-hmm.
my former superintendent.
Yep. But he did not send you back to the farm then.
No, I became a teacher from then on. You know, from then on. Yeah. Now from Frankfurt, and I went to Scottsville. But I don't know how I got there, but again, my memory. But how long did I teach in Frankfurt?
12 years,
12 years?
yes.
Okay, see, 12 years.
Okay.
Well, that's the end of the
Well,
story.
it's a remarkable story. We'll make a point of getting a copy of your book, and we'll have that in the library and in the file we have for you, including on this video. The people who look at the video will know that there is a book and that we have it, and they can see the rest of the story there. So thank you very much for talking to me today.
We have 2 books left, only.
Okay, then I better move, hadn't I?